Hey guys, Heidi Preep here. Today I wanted to talk about something that turned into a little bit of not a rant, but a conversation on my Twitter, where I was talking about how I would not name the attachment styles what they are named if I were currently in charge of naming them. Now, obviously, this is just because I was not the original attachment researcher. I was not John Bowlby or Mary Ainsworth. And the names that they gave the attachment styles, I believe, fit in a way at the time. But as language has evolved and as life has gone on, we have learned to associate different terms with different things, especially terms like anxious or avoidant. And I think that those terms no longer properly encapsulate what those attachment styles are really about. However, what I wanted to talk about today was the conversation that came out of that consideration, which is when I was thinking about what I would name the styles instead, it kind of became increasingly clear to me that something gets left out of the attachment dialogue quite a bit, in that we talk about it, but we don't focus on it as a central component of attachment, and it really is. And what that thing is our relationship, not just to each other, not just to our attachment figures, but to emotional pain. So how we process emotional pain is a massive component of our attachment styles, and it's something that we don't always directly address. But a lot of the behaviors that extend outward from our attachment style are to do with the way that we are regulating, thinking about, and consciously interacting with the pain that we feel in life. Now, first of all, nobody is immune to pain. That is not a thing. Every human being who is alive, even psychopaths, feel pain about their own emotions. So no one is immune to emotional pain. That's not an option we get in life. But the way that we experience emotional pain is very different person to person. And one of the biggest mediating factors in relation to how we experience emotional pain is our attachment system. So one of the questions that I get very often is, why does attachment style form so young? So our very early attachment responses beneath the age of 2 or 3 are highly predictive of the attachment style that we will form as an adult. So while our attachment styles absolutely grow and mature with us and develop dynamically alongside us, the reason why early experiences are so important for forming certain attachment styles is because when we are under the age of 2 or 3, our brains are developing so quickly and we are learning so rapidly and we are internalizing all of these thoughts and ideas that will predispose our brains to firing the same way over and over again, because that is how learning works in the brain. The experiences that we have shape the way the neurons fire in our brain. And anyone who's interacted with even a little bit of pop psychology, neurobiology, knows that neurons that fire together wire together. And what that means is that the very early experiences that we have form neural pathways in our brain that get repeated over and over again in life. So our brain literally forms around the early experiences that we have. Now, that doesn't mean that those neural pathways are set in stone. As we grow up, if we apply conscious and deliberate effort to changing our attachment system, we can do it with the help of a professional who understands how to rewire our minds to start thinking about attachment differently. However, if we don't consciously attack our attachment style at a young age, which most of us do not, our brains literally develop around certain ways of processing and thinking. And one of the main things that we learn to process very early on is emotional distress and pain. So like we've talked about in previous videos, attachment styles form because the behaviors that go along with them were once very adaptive for us. So for example, let's look at the dismissive avoidant. I don't love the term avoidant actually for the avoidant attachment style, because to avoid something, we have to first be consciously aware of it, and we have to choose to dismiss it and to focus on something else. And in the case of the dismissive avoidant, that is actually not what's happening. That's actually more similar to what's happening for the anxious preoccupied type or the fearful avoidant when they're trying to consciously not think about relationships. They might be consciously trying to avoid distressing thoughts about them. However, with the dismissive avoidant, it's more often the case that distressing, emotionally painful thoughts don't enter their awareness in the first place. Okay? Because from a very young age, they learned to dismiss those thoughts and focus more intently on other thoughts, because this is what was adaptive for them at an early age. So when you have someone who is, let's say, for lack of a better term, just a little bit avoidant. So there is a spectrum, right? You can have someone who is extremely avoidant. You can have someone who is almost secure, but just a little bit on the avoidant side of things. And for those people, what may have happened when they were very young children is that their parents weren't necessarily abusive. They wouldn't necessarily hit them or be outwardly cruel to them if they showed a negative emotion, but it's highly likely that the parent would respond in some subtle way negatively to the child's display of negative emotions. So often this happens when you have an avoidant parent themselves who for their entire life has learned to suppress negative emotions. So now when their baby shows a negative emotion, they might either get a little bit stressed out because they don't know how to respond to it, or they might show a little bit of subtle contempt or hostility towards the child for displaying a negative emotion. And the child will learn through operant conditioning that my parent responds best to me when I show my parent happy emotions. When I show my parent that I am okay, I am regulated, and when I go up and maybe make a funny joke at them, or when I do something that I know they want me to do. So this child learns to dismiss their negative emotions, not because they think it makes them tough, or because they consciously see the survival value of it, but because they have just learned in a very primitive, very simplistic way, negative emotions don't get me what I want, but displaying positive emotions, or at the least suppressing my negative emotions and not focusing too much on them, does get me what I want, which is access to my caregiver's warmth and attention. And so as they grow up, they develop a consistent pattern of not valuing the information that their negative emotions are providing them with. So if they have a negative thought, avoidant types tend to be quite quick to either reframe, to focus on something else. Their brain kind of naturally just reroutes to a thought that they believe is more productive. So these are often the people who, as soon as they have a problem, they just want to fix it. They don't want to dwell on it. They don't want to think about their emotions related to it. They just want to find a solution. And this is not because they have consciously dismissed their negative emotions. It does not mean that they have felt this overwhelming sense of sadness and pain and decided, I'm not going to focus on that. It could be to an extent, but it's more likely that as soon as that emotion comes up, their brain automatically does a redirect and goes, okay, what's the solution? What's the answer? Let's get cracking. They actually can find it very difficult to access and to sit with their negative emotions. It's just not as conscious for them and as accessible to them as it is for people who are either secure or anxious. Now, you can also have someone who is more avoidant, so further down on the kind of avoidantly attached spectrum. And this is often, not always, but often, children who grew up in more dangerous environments. So children who had caregivers who were predictably hostile and outwardly either abusive or aggressive towards them when they showed negative emotion. So these children really learned to suppress those negative emotions because it was not only unpleasant and useless for them to feel them, it was actually dangerous for them to feel them. So as these types of avoidantly attached people grow up, they really learn to suppress things both unconsciously and consciously. And they might actually get angry when they see other people expressing their emotions because for them, it was never safe. They were never allowed to do that. And so it feels unfair that other people are expressing their emotions and it's safe and fine and okay for them when the avoidant has spent so much of their life learning to keep themselves okay and regulated and tough so that they weren't in danger. So these types of avoidants might actually develop a little bit of an ego around their ability to suffer without complaint. So these are more likely to be the people who consciously like to think of themselves as very tough, very capable, and they might take a little bit of pleasure in looking down on people who don't match their level of toughness. They almost never recognize what was done to them as a child as abuse. They tend to idealize one or both of their parent figures, or at the least excuse them and go, they were just teaching me a lesson, they were just giving me tough love. So you get this very kind of tough exterior, right? And that is not them consciously choosing to be that way. It is truly the way that their neurology wired as a child to keep themselves safe. We prioritize information that is valuable and we dismiss information that is not valuable. And if you are consistently rejected, beat up, abused every time you show negative emotion, you learn very quickly, very young, showing negative emotion is not useful. Showing perseverance, toughness, an ability to stand up for myself and get what I need for myself is useful. And so that's what these type of avoidants learn to prioritize. So you can kind of think of it like this. Imagine if, at a very young age, something went wrong in your brain that caused you to not feel physical pain. So there was something off in your wiring, and when you put your hand on a hot stove, you don't know your hand's on a hot stove because you don't feel pain. If you break your leg, you don't know your leg is broken until you look down and see your leg flopping around because you don't feel physical pain. Now, this might seem like an advantage on the surface, but it's actually very debilitating because physical pain is there to alert us to a problem, right? It is a giant red flag saying, stop, don't keep exerting pressure on this area. This needs to heal and rest. And the same is true of emotional pain. So it might seem attractive on the surface to not feel much emotional pain, or to have your emotional pain receptors, so to speak, kind of dulled, the way that avoidantly attached people do. However, it's actually very maladaptive because emotional pain, like physical pain, is in our psyche to serve as a red flag. It tells us when to stop, when the thing that we're doing is not right for us, when it's leading us down a bad path. It alerts us to red flags in relationships with other people. And so emotional pain is something that is actually quite important to have and to be aware of and to be able to process. And I'm going to make a whole video on this because I think it's a really important topic where I discuss in depth the value of sensitizing yourself to emotional pain as an avoidant or an avoidant spectrum type, and how we can work with emotional pain to make better decisions and to think more effectively. But this video is just about familiarizing ourselves with the different attachment styles' experiences of pain. So this also kind of accounts for something that can feel frustrating for other people in relationship with avoidance, right? Because avoidants have kind of dulled emotional pain receptors, but they don't know that that's the case. They think that everybody experiences pain on the same level. They can get very impatient when other people are expressing emotional pain all the time. Because in their minds, if it doesn't feel that bad for them when a given thing happens, it must be true that for other people it also doesn't feel that bad. So when they see someone complaining about something or acting like they are in extreme emotional pain over a situation that the avoidant would truly not feel that much emotional pain over, it's very easy to assume that that other person is exaggerating or that they are trying to get something out of crying and making a show of their pain, because the avoidant doesn't automatically know that they're wired differently than other people. They don't know that other people are actually feeling much more conscious pain than they are. So it can be very easy to get frustrated, to believe that everyone else is exaggerating as an avoidant type, but your healing journey lies in learning to sensitize yourself to emotional pain and understanding what a healthy amount of it is, as well as how to work with it healthily. We're not trying to make you into an emotional mess. We're not trying to make you into someone who cannot regulate themselves. We're just trying to reach a place where our emotions are available enough to us to access that we can start working with the entire range of emotions, not just the few that early on in life we deemed very important. Now, the anxiously attached type. So the anxiously attached type had kind of the opposite experience of the avoidant type very early in life, in that their parents were often responsive to their negative displays of emotion, but they were not consistently responsive. So what that means is that when the anxious baby would cry, when they would show that they were upset, when they would display vulnerability, as all babies are apt to do, we are literally wired to do those things. Sometimes their parent would respond to them, and sometimes their parent would not be as available or as responsive. And so, again, human instinct kicks in, and what do babies do when that's the case? They cry louder, they follow their parent into the next room, they try to show with increasing intensity, I need help. And when you're a baby, you absolutely do need help. You cannot solve your own survival problems when you're an infant. But these are the babies who had to work a little bit harder to consistently get their parents' attention. So they learned, as soon as I feel upset or anxious or like I need something, I have to really amplify my expression of that experience in order to get the best chance at my parent responding. So as soon as the anxiously attached person feels a negative emotion, there is this deeply ingrained, deeply hardwired response in them to instantly bring it to the attention of those who love them, because they believe that if they bring it to other people's attention, and if they bring it emphatically enough to other people's attention, someone will eventually show up to help soothe their pain. Now, in some situations, this is a perfectly healthy response. We all need people, we all need each other. Co-regulation is very much a part of secure relationships as well. However, what's different from the secure response and the anxious response is that securely attached individuals, usually at a very young age, had emotional first aid, so to speak, modeled for them. So the parent didn't just soothe them, they also displayed and modeled healthy emotional coping skills. So as the secure child grows up, they watch their parents access uncomfortable emotions like pain and distress and discomfort, and they watch how their parents move through those emotions, and they learn to do the same thing themselves. But with the anxiously attached child, what you often get is a child who doesn't have a parent figure who models healthy emotional regulation for them. So they never really learn how to soothe their own distress. They never really learn how to calm down when they're upset or when they're angry or when they're stressed. And so as a result, they learn if I need to stop feeling a negative emotion, I need to find someone else to soothe me. And then we get this perpetual experience of the anxiously attached person trying to find a partner who they believe will be able to meet all of their needs as soon as their needs come up. Now, that isn't consciously how it feels for the anxiously attached person. How it consciously feels is like they just get very invested very quickly, like they really want to be around their partner a lot of the time, and then they start to get anxious if they see signs that their partner might not be as invested or their partner might not be as readily available to them as they would like. But this would not be a problem if they had the ability to self-soothe. For example, insecure relationships, partners like to spend a lot of time together, that's very normal, but they can also separate and do their own thing without much anxiety because both know I'm okay when I'm with my partner and I'm okay when I'm not with my partner, because if something happens that upsets me, I know how to soothe myself. It might be nice to have someone else there with me to help me work through it, but if that's not possible, I'm perfectly capable of working through my emotions on my own. And this is where the anxiously attached person struggles. So whereas the avoidant person kind of has dulled pain receptors, the anxiously attached person is missing the mechanism that makes pain stop. So imagine if every time you stubbed your toe, you just went on feeling pain until someone else fixed your toe for you. Imagine if every time you got a headache, you would just keep having a headache with increasing intensity until someone else came along and fixed your headache for you. You would start to get a little bit anxious about always having someone around and available to you, because what if you hurt yourself? And then you will be in pain, and the pain will just keep getting worse and worse and worse until someone shows up to stop it. And that's kind of what it's like to be anxiously attached. If you emotionally hurt yourself in any way and you don't know how to self-regulate, you need someone around, preferably as soon as possible, in order to help you soothe your pain. So let's say you're in a partnership where you live with your partner and everything's great when they're there, but now they need to go away for a week for work. Your brain might start getting really, really anxious, even if you intellectually know, I'm perfectly fine with my partner going away for a week. That's totally allowed, and there's a very valid reason why they're going. Your brain might start getting really anxious because without you consciously being aware of this, your brain is freaked out that if you feel emotional pain, there won't be someone around to help you regulate it. So the reason why I don't like the term anxious attachment is because anxiety is not actually the core of the problem. The core of the problem is an inability to regulate pain, among a few other things. So if I were renaming the attachment styles, I think I would call avoidant attachment something along the lines of like oblivious attachment, like they are not conscious of their own need for comfort, for attachment, for interdependence. And I would call the anxious attachment something like obsessive attachment, because the conscious experience of the anxiously attached person is that they can have obsessive thoughts about relationships and the availability of their partner, because again, they're trying to mitigate that pain. Or maybe we could call it something along the lines of like perpetual pain preoccupation. I don't know. Definitely do not allow me to rename the styles. It would not be like catchy names. But what I'm getting at here is that our attachment systems are very much centered around, to an extent, our ability to regulate emotion and to manage emotional pain. If you are fearful avoidant, you will do a mix of both of these strategies, and that will be very confusing because you will, for example, feel like you're not feeling any pain for a long period of time. Maybe you have dulled pain receptors in some parts of your brain, but then all of a sudden something might happen that leaves you in screaming emotional pain, and you will absolutely need someone instantly to come help you soothe it. And you won't really understand what happened, the other people won't really understand what happened, and it will make for a very confusing experience because the fearful avoidant is constantly kind of trying to work out, who am I? Am I a person who's really tough and who can handle a lot? Or am I a person who really needs other people and who is overly invested and attached in relationships? And often they ricochet between those two extremes based on what triggers are happening for them at a given point in time. So this is a very disorienting experience, both for the fearful avoidant and for the person dating them. And so the route to healing for the fearful avoidant is doing a little bit of each, figuring out where your pain receptors are not functioning properly, where they've been dulled, and then sensitizing yourself to the areas in which you are feeling emotional pain in your body but not processing it consciously, as well as learning to regulate your emotions around the areas where you do feel constant and conscious screaming emotional pain. So it's double the work if you're a fearful avoidant, but it's also by definition double the reward if you end up earning secure attachment in the end. All right, that is all I have to say for today. Again, I'm going to follow up with videos that talk more about how these things show up for each of the individual attachment styles. Not necessarily soon, but in the coming months for sure. So stay tuned for those, and in the comments, let me know what's resonated for you in this video, what your experience is or has been of emotional pain, and any other aha moments that maybe you've had or are starting to have about your own attachment system. All right, I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I will see you back here again soon.